The scent was what got to you first. Not a stench, not a foul odor, but a subtle, almost floral sweetness that clung to the air like a phantom. Lucas had been a homicide detective for 12 years, and he'd smelled everything the city could throw at him. Stale sweat and cheap cologne on a perp, the metallic tang of an alleyway crime scene, the antiseptic sterility of the morgue. But this was new. It was a faint, cloying sweetness, like old rosewater mixed with something else, something deeply wrong, something that felt biological. The victim was a young man, early 20s, found in a deserted warehouse district. He was slumped against a stack of pallets, a single, precise cut across his throat. The blood, a shocking, vibrant crimson, had pooled on the concrete floor, a morbid Rorschach test. But Lucas wasn't looking at the blood. He was watching the flies. They weren't buzzing around the crimson pool as they normally would. They were congregating on the victim's red t-shirt, a simple cotton garment, and a few were landing on the small, almost imperceptible droplets of something else on his skin. A faint, oily residue. "What's that smell, boss?" asked Officer Ramirez, a rookie with a perpetually nervous twitch. "Smells like my grandma's perfume." Lucas didn't answer. He just knelt down, careful not to disturb the scene, and sniffed the air near the victim's shirt. The scent was stronger here, a nauseating mix of that sweet rosewater and something else. Something deep and ancient and utterly terrifying, something that felt like it had been waiting. The victim, Lucas noted, was wearing a perfectly ordinary red t-shirt, just like the last victim. And the one before that. 3 victims in 3 weeks, each one a stranger to the other, each one wearing red. And each time the same faint, disturbing scent in the air. A scent that, for some reason, seemed to attract flies. Lucas felt a cold dread seep into his bones, a feeling that had nothing to do with the cool concrete of the warehouse floor. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a pattern. But what was the pattern for? Ramirez was a good kid, but he was all textbook and no gut instinct. He kept bringing up the red t-shirts. It's a ritualistic element, detective. The killer's marking them. It's a symbolic gesture, a signature. Lucas, however, was haunted by the smell. The rosewater sweetness, a smell that had followed him home, a ghost in his nasal passages. He'd woken up that morning, and for a split second, he thought he smelled it on his own pillow. He'd rationalized it as a psychosomatic effect, a byproduct of working a grim case, but the feeling of unease persisted. The victims had no connection. A college student, a construction worker, and now an unemployed graphic designer. Their lives were separate, their social circles didn't overlap, and their geographical locations were spread across the city. The only common denominator, besides the manner of death and the red shirts, was the smell. He brought it up in the briefing. "Has anyone else noticed a strange odor at the scene, a sweet, almost floral scent?" The room was silent. A few of the older detectives exchanged a look, the kind that said, "Lucas is getting a little too deep on this one." The captain, a man who had seen it all and believed none of it, just grunted. "Stick to the evidence, detective. The victimology is random. The MO is consistent. The red shirts are the only pattern we have. Focus on that. The press is on our ass about the red shirt killer." Lucas nodded, but he knew they were missing something fundamental. He went back to the evidence room, staring at the sealed bags containing the victim's clothes. Each red shirt, a simple cotton thing, a bland detail of a mundane life now stained with tragedy. He opened the bag containing the 3rd victim's shirt, pulling it out with gloved hands. The scent was fainter here, but it was still there. That cloying, sickening sweetness. He held it up to the light, and that's when he saw it. The faint, almost invisible residue he'd seen on the victim's skin smeared on the front of the shirt. It was oily, almost like a thin film of something. He took a sample, a tiny scraping, and sent it to the lab with a special request. Test for everything, and I mean everything. Don't stop until you have a hit. He felt a growing certainty, a sickening conviction. The red wasn't the point, it was just a distraction. The real key was something else entirely, something invisible, something that you couldn't see, only smell. The lab report came back a few days later, a cryptic, unsettling document. The oily substance was a complex mix of lipids and proteins. It contained traces of something that mimicked human sweat, but with an unfamiliar chemical signature. It wasn't a known poison or a drug. It was something new, and its most striking component was a synthetic compound that mimicked the scent of a rare, almost extinct rose. A specific type of rose known for its unusually sweet, almost suffocating fragrance. The report stated the substance was likely a custom-made concoction, a designer scent. Lucas felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't some random, impulsive killer. This was someone meticulous, someone deliberate. Someone who was hunting for a specific quality, not a specific color. He called the lab tech, a young woman named Dr. Anya Sharma, who had been on the case since the beginning. "So, what is this stuff?" he asked, his voice low. "I can't say for sure, Lucas," she said, her voice sounding strained, "but it's a synthetic pheromone blend. The rose scent is a distraction, a cover. The primary compound, it's designed to bind to human skin oils. It's incredibly subtle, almost undetectable without a specific chemical analysis. The human nose would just perceive it as a vague, sweet smell." "So, someone is putting this on their victims?" Lucas asked, a horrifying possibility forming in his mind. "No, that's the thing," Anya said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "We found traces of it on the victim's skin, but it was also present on their clothes, their shoes, their hair. It was everywhere. It's not a spray. It's a diffuse, airborne agent. The most likely vector is that it was aerosolized like a perfume or a room freshener. The victims were walking around, covered in this stuff, for who knows how long before they were killed." Lucas felt a wave of nausea wash over him. The killer wasn't choosing people based on a visual cue. He was choosing them based on an olfactory one. He was choosing them based on a scent. And the red shirts, he brought up the idea to Anya. "The victims are all wearing red shirts. Do you think that's related?" Anya was silent for a moment. "It's statistically improbable, but not impossible. The substance we found, it's specifically designed to bond to human skin oils, but it also has a strong affinity for cotton, especially a specific dye used in inexpensive red cotton shirts. It would make the scent cling, amplifying it, like a beacon." Lucas hung up the phone, his mind reeling. The police force, the captain, the press, they were all focused on the color red. They were looking for a killer with a visual motive, but the real motive was something far more sinister, far more primal. The killer wasn't seeing red, he was smelling it, and the victims were walking around completely unaware, radiating a scent that marked them for death. A scent that, to the killer, was an unbearable affront. Lucas began to see red everywhere. On the street, in the subway, in the grocery store. Red T-shirts, red hoodies, red jackets. He saw them, and a prickle of cold fear ran up his spine. He started to follow people, to catch a faint whiff of a scent he was now convinced he knew, a sweetness that was a harbinger of doom. He'd find himself walking behind a woman in a red sweater, her perfume mixing with the city air, and for a split second, he would smell it. The sweet rose water. He'd stop dead in his tracks, his heart pounding, his body drenched in a cold sweat. He'd follow her for a block or two, a silent, unseen guardian until the feeling passed and he'd rationalize it away. But the feeling was getting stronger. The city was a sea of red and every person wearing it was a potential victim. His sleep became a torment. He would dream of vast, empty rooms filled with a suffocating, floral scent. In the dreams, he was a fly, buzzing in a frantic circle, trying to find the source, the center of the scent. And he would see a figure, a blurred silhouette, moving in the shadows. He could never see their face, but he could feel their presence, a profound, primal loathing that radiated from them. The figure would hold out their hand, and in their palm would be a single, perfect red rose, its petals dripping with a viscous, black liquid. And then he would wake up, his heart hammering against his ribs, the phantom scent of rosewater and something else still in the air. He went back to the lab unannounced. Anya was hunched over a microscope, her brow furrowed. "Lucas, what are you doing here? You look terrible." "Tell me about the phobia," he said, his voice raw. "What phobia?" she asked, looking up, confused. "The phobia of the smell of blood. It's not something the average person knows about. It's rare, but it exists. It's called hemophobia, but it's more specific than that. The fear of the sight of blood is one thing, but the smell, it's a specific, visceral reaction. Some people say it's a survival instinct gone wrong, an ancient fear of predation." Anya's eyes widened, a dawning horror in their depths. "Lucas, the scent. The concoction we found, the synthetic pheromone. It's a very specific type of molecule. We did some further testing. The primary compound, it's designed to trigger a specific olfactory response, a revulsion response. It's a perfect mimic for the scent of blood, but an older, more primal version, a pre-decompositional scent, the kind of thing an animal would smell on a fresh kill." Lucas felt the floor give way beneath him. So, the killer isn't choosing them based on a phobia of the smell of blood. He's choosing them because he's a hemophobe, and the scent he's creating is a lure. He's not repulsed by the blood, he's repulsed by something else entirely, something that smells like blood to him, something that the victims are wearing. Anya nodded, her face pale. "The victims aren't wearing red because he likes the color. He's colorblind. He's wearing them because he has a phobia of something that smells like blood to him, and he's using a custom-made scent to find his victims, a scent that is designed to cling to red shirts to amplify itself. The red shirt is just a coincidence. The killer is finding his victims based on an odor he perceives as the smell of blood, and he's using a synthetic scent to find them." The truth, when it hit, was a cold, hard, sickening blow. The killer was not a monster. He was a man with a phobia. A man who was terrified of something so fundamental to human existence that he was willing to kill to avoid it. Lucas went to the captain with the new theory. He laid it all out, the synthetic pheromone, the connection to the red dye, the phobia, the custom-made scent. The captain listened, his face a mask of polite skepticism. "Lucas," he said, his voice weary, "this is getting out of hand. You're talking about a killer who's choosing his victims based on a chemical that mimics the smell of blood, which he's allergic to, and which happens to cling to a specific color of shirt that he can't even see. It sounds like something out of a pulp novel. We have a solid lead on a suspect, a man with a history of violence and a known hatred of a specific gang whose members wear red." Lucas felt a wave of despair wash over him. "He's not a gang member, sir. He's a man who is being driven to kill by a phobia. He's not a monster. He's a victim of his own mind." The captain just shook his head. "Lucas, I'm putting you on leave. You're too close to this. Go home, rest, come back when you've got your head straight." Lucas didn't argue. He knew it was a lost cause. They were looking for a motive, a reason, something they could put in a file and close. They weren't looking for a broken man who was being driven to madness by an invisible, odorless scent. They were looking for a monster, and Lucas knew with a terrifying certainty that they were looking in the wrong place. He was alone now, isolated. The police force, his colleagues, his friends, they all thought he was unraveling, and maybe he was. Maybe the stress, the sleepless nights, the phantom smells, maybe it was all getting to him. He went home, a silence settling around him, a heavy, suffocating silence. He was alone in his pursuit, a man chasing a ghost. But it wasn't a ghost, it was a killer. A colorblind killer who was hunting for a specific smell. A killer who was terrified of a scent that, to him, was the smell of blood. Lucas sat alone in his apartment, the silence a deafening roar in his ears. He was staring at the case file, the pictures of the victims, the smiling faces now cold and lifeless. He looked at their red shirts, the cheap cotton, the bright crimson. He looked at the forensic report, the complex chemical formula of the synthetic pheromone. He looked at the lab report, the mention of the specific dye used in the shirts, and then he saw it. A single, small, almost invisible detail. The dye was a specific formulation, a brand name. He looked it up. It was a new dye, patented by a small, independent chemical company. The company's name was familiar. He had a memory of seeing it on a corporate sponsorship poster for a local charity. A charity for children with rare medical conditions. And then the pieces clicked into place, a horrifying mosaic of truth. The company's CEO, a man named Adrian Finch, had a son who was born with a rare medical condition that made him completely colorblind but with a heightened sense of smell, a hyper-olfactory condition. The boy, as a child, had been exposed to a traumatic incident. A simple cut on his finger that had bled profusely. The smell of the blood had triggered a profound, visceral fear response, a deep-seated hemophobia that had haunted him his entire life. The smell of blood, to him, was a sickening, terrifying assault on his senses. The father, Adrian Finch, a man of immense wealth and power, had been obsessed with finding a way to help his son. He had commissioned a team of chemists, not to cure the condition, but to create a substance that would trigger that same primal fear response. A substance that would mimic the smell of blood, but in a controlled, safe environment. A way to desensitize his son to the fear. But the experiment had gone horribly wrong. The son, now a man in his 30s, had a profound, pathological reaction to the scent. To him, it was not a scent he could be desensitized to. It was the scent of death itself, and the father, out of some twisted sense of paternal love, had found a way to weaponize that fear. He had created a synthetic pheromone, a custom scent, that mimicked the smell of blood to his son's hyper-olfactory senses. He had made it in his own lab, a secret project, and then he had found a way to aerosolize it, a fine mist that he could use to find his victims. He would go to a crowded place, a mall, a park, and he would release the mist. The scent would cling to people, but it would have a particularly strong affinity for a specific dye. The red dye used in cheap cotton t-shirts. The victims weren't victims because they were wearing red. They were victims because they were wearing a shirt that, to the killer's hypersensitive nose, smelled like blood. And the killer, a man named Lucas Finch, a man who had no idea his father had been responsible for his condition, had a phobia so profound that he was willing to kill to avoid the smell of death. Lucas drove to the Finch family estate, a sprawling, secluded property on the outskirts of the city. He didn't call for backup. He knew they wouldn't believe him. He had to do this alone. The house was a fortress of glass and steel, a testament to a man who had everything but peace of mind. He found Adrian Finch in his study, a sterile, minimalist room filled with art that seemed to mock the concept of color. Lucas walked in, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. "Mr. Finch," he said, his voice steady, "I know." Adrian Finch looked up from his desk, his face a mask of calm, cold indifference. "Know what, detective? I know about your son, and I know about the scent, the synthetic pheromone, the phobia, the red shirts, the deaths." Adrian Finch's face didn't change, but his eyes, two pools of cold, dark rage, narrowed. "My son is a good man, detective. He's a victim of a cruel twist of fate. He's not a killer." "He's a killer, Mr. Finch," Lucas said, his voice rising, "because you made him a killer. You didn't just give him a phobia, you gave him a weapon. A weapon he's been using to hunt people he thinks are covered in the smell of blood. You've been sending him out into the world, an unwitting monster, to kill for you." Adrian Finch stood up, a slow, deliberate movement. "You have no idea what you're talking about, detective. My son is colorblind. He can't even see the red shirts." "But he can smell them, Mr. Finch," Lucas said, a cold, hard certainty in his voice. He can smell the pheromone, the custom scent you developed, the scent that you created to make him think he's smelling blood. He's not a monster. You are. You're the one who designed the scent. You're the one who found a way to make it cling to a specific dye. You're the one who has been using your son as a weapon, a blunt instrument of your own sick, twisted desire to protect him from a world he can't even see. Adrian Finch lunged at him, a sudden, desperate movement. He was a man of immense power, but he was no match for Lucas. Lucas ducked under his wild swing, grabbing his arm and twisting it behind his back. He slammed him against the wall, his own breath coming in ragged gasps. "Where is he, Finch? Where is your son? Where is the scent? Where is the custom-made weapon?" Adrian Finch's face, for the first time, broke. A flash of fear, of desperation, crossed his features. "He's not here, he's out, he's looking for the next one." And then Lucas heard it. A faint, cloying sweetness in the air, a scent he knew all too well. It was coming from the window, a small, subtle gust of wind, the scent of rose water, and he knew, with a horrifying, sickening certainty, that he wasn't alone. Lucas Finch, the son, the colorblind killer, was here, and he was hunting. And Lucas, standing in the middle of a room filled with abstract art and silent screams, was wearing a perfectly ordinary red t-shirt. The scent, Lucas knew, was already clinging to him. He could almost feel it, a cold, oily film on his skin. A scent that, to Lucas Finch, was the smell of death. Lucas turned, his heart a hammer against his ribs, and saw him. Lucas Finch, a man in his 30s, his face a blank, placid mask. He was standing in the doorway, a look of profound revulsion on his face. He wasn't looking at Lucas. He was looking at the red t-shirt. He was looking at the scent. He took a step forward, a slow, deliberate movement. His eyes, a pale, milky blue, were fixed on the crimson fabric, a fabric that to him was a beacon of death. "It's a mistake," Lucas said, his voice low, a desperate plea. "It's a custom scent. Your father, he designed it. It's a fake." Lucas Finch didn't speak. He just took another step, the revulsion on his face deepening. He was holding something in his hand, a small, ornate silver-handled blade. The blade was a clean, sharp, precise instrument, the same kind of instrument that had killed 3 people in 3 weeks. The same kind of instrument that was now moving, slowly, deliberately, towards Lucas. "He's colorblind," Adrian Finch said, his voice a desperate, pleading whisper from behind Lucas. "He can't see the color, he can only smell it." Lucas looked at the killer, at the blank, placid face, at the eyes that saw nothing but an invisible, sickening scent. And he knew, with a horrifying certainty, that there was no reasoning with him. He wasn't a monster. He was a man with a phobia, a man who was being driven to madness by an invisible, odorless scent. A man who was terrified of something so fundamental to human existence that he was willing to kill to avoid it. The blade moved, a flash of silver in the dim light. Lucas didn't even have time to scream. The cut was precise, clean, and deep. The warm, metallic tang of his own blood filled his nostrils, a scent that, to him, was the scent of life. But to the man in front of him, it was the scent of death. The last thing he saw was the look on Lucas Finch's face, a look of profound relief, of a deep, primal fear finally sated. And then the world went dark. The final frame is a slow-motion shot of the silver blade, dripping with a single, perfectly formed drop of blood. The drop falls onto the pristine white marble floor, a splash of vibrant crimson against a backdrop of cold, sterile perfection. The scent, Lucas knew, was now clinging to the house. The scent of death, and there was no one left to stop it.